Good morning. This is Daybreak on Citizen Television. Thank you for making time on the broadcast. Your time is appreciated. Later, within the course of this broadcast, we'll sample your feedback. The hashtag on Twitter is Daybreak. The SMS code is 22422 at Citizen TV Kenya and at Ayub Abdikadir with me in studio. Members of Parliament, the chair of the Education Committee, who as well is the lawmaker representing Tinderet constituency, Julius Meli. Good morning, Mheshimiwa. Thank you for your time. As well as Lugari Member of Parliament, Nabina Bwera, who is a member of that Education Committee. And we also have Ken Echesa, who is an education law expert, and Amos Kaburu on my immediate right, who is the chief counsel at Opticam, to talk about the education sector in the country, the financial inadequacies decried by stakeholders, coming against the backdrop of the secondary schools heads meeting, which happened in the county of Mombasa, and raised fears that some core activities in schools across the country under the calendar for schools are bound to be adversely affected over delays in release of capital funds by the government. The school heads, whose meeting ended in Mombasa County, also challenged the national government to increase the allocation per child to match the changing economic realities in the country, saying that the turbulence economically is affecting the pockets of many parents. The Cabinet, however, Secretary for Education, Ezekiel Machogu, has, however, assured the stakeholders that the government has allocated sufficient funds in this financial year's plans by the government. And here is what he said during the meeting which ended in the county of Mombasa. We'll be getting the soundbite of the Education CS, Ezekiel Machogu, who said that the government will be releasing the sufficient funding required for the education sector in this financial year by the Kenya Kwanza administration.
We want to get back from the the current quarterly system to the ratio of 50, 30, and 20 going forward. Kindly also do a proper market survey, because I know you are also operating on a very tight financial situation, so that you are able to get the correct figure.
That is the CS. Coming to you first, Ken Echesa, what informs, despite having a huge chunk of the budget, may I say, half $1 trillion of what was allocated the education sector in the country, what informs the inadequacies financially that stakeholders have decried in that Mombasa meeting and generally across the education sector?
Thank you very much, Abdiharim and my colleagues. One, I think the government and the Ministry of Education is living a lie. We have increased demand for education. Remember, we are living in a society that has 100% transition, and the government is telling us that they have increased funding over years to the education sector. What is ailing the sector is that what they purport to be funding schools is not what gets to school. The minister says with one mouth that we have released 500 or 28 billion, for example, to schools, and what hits schools' account is less than 20% of what the minister said. So we have a problem with what we allocate. I still maintain from my own view that what we allocate to education sector is not enough. But the problem comes when what is not enough does not even reach the schools. Capitation now is placed at about 22,400. Out of these 22,400, they have raided it. The ministry has raided it and said the 5,000 is conditional for infrastructure, leaving the schools with about 15,000. Out of 15, they have retained monies that they are not able to account for, like textbook money and activity money. Textbooks, the government has never accounted to the principals that this is what we retained and this is what we've used for the textbooks. In the past 1 year, for example, about last month, they were able to send set books. Set books is a very small percentage of the textbooks required. And the activity money, government has retained this money, and the same government is not funding activities. Counties, through their directors, are now raiding schools and principals to tell them to fund activities. They retain the money. They do not take the money back to the counties to fund activities. Term 2 ball games are ongoing. The county of Kisumu, for example, has made it very clear to the schools that only one team shall proceed to regionals when there are 3 times the teams are supposed to proceed. In Kakamega, schools have been asked to cater for their own activities. where will they get these funds?
Okay, we'll talk about the shortfall and what was requested, for example, by stakeholders. And Kahi Ndimuli said that we propose the Ministry of Education considers to increase the capitation from the current figure of 22,244 shillings to 30,000 this financial year. Coming to you, Honorable Julius Mele, huge budgetary commitment and allocation by the government, and that has been over the years a tradition. But certainly the practical bit is that this is insufficient to run learning institutions in the country. Why do you think that's the case?
Thank you, thank you, Abdikadir, and I want to say thank you for this morning show. First of all, let me commend the Kenya Kwanza administration for the bold move that they have actually taken to increase funding for schools. I think from 576 last year's budget to 627 this year. Billion shillings. In this, you'll realize that the chunk of this money goes to funding capitation in schools, both primary and secondary, and the new university funding model, where it has doubled from 15 billion to 30 billion. But let me come back to the secondary school, where we have a serious problem. And the problem here is in release of funds. Surely the funds come in when it is too late. You realize that most of these funds are released when it is almost the end of the term, when most of the activities would have actually been done. Two, I would also want to say that the component of capitation, the component of infrastructure in the capitation is what we actually did as a Committee of Education when we were in Parliament. And we said the best way to fund school projects is through the student, not through the earlier mode, where people canvass, where people would come to the ministry and ask for money. Those who had influence could be able to get maybe 10 million, and those who could not were not able to get anything. That's why we, as a Committee of Education, we sat down in the last Parliament and say, let the infrastructure funds be funded through the child. If you have 10,000 students and you have 5,000 shillings, the school will get 5 million. What of an instance where the principal is not able to canvass?
Okay.
He will not get anything. So that is actually why we did that. That's why I want to tell Mheshimiwa Cheza that. Two, textbooks. Previously, I want to tell this show that previously, in the last about 6 or 7 years earlier, many of our schools had 10, 15 textbooks in one subject in a class of 40 students. Currently now, the textbook ratio is 1:1. It's one of the best in the world. And I think after Mauritius, I think one of the best countries with textbook ratios. So that illustrates the kind of work that has been done. But however, after the textbooks have been distributed to schools, it is now that the funds needs to go back because they don't need more books. So if you reduce the textbooks, after some time, if the books are enough in schools, then those funds now go and do another activity. Maybe buy science equipment. Now we are going for the 3 pathways, the arts, the STEM, and the social sciences. That is where now the government needs to fund even more as we are constructing labs in the junior secondary schools. So, but the other aspect which I think came in was during COVID, when the government reduced activity fees. And it reduced it to almost zero. But in this financial year, and I think Mheshimiwa Nabi, who is a member of my committee, is aware, we've actually increased that funds to almost 700 million. So because the schools now and the activities have come to optimum, therefore we'll not have a serious issue. But the real elephant in the room is the delay in the release. That is the most important.
I'll come to you, Honorable Nabi and Amos. I wanted to specifically dwell on that, the delay in the funding.
Yes.
The Ministry of Education says it's committed to 100% transition, for instance. It's committed to the government's pledge that no child should be sent home because of lack of school fees. But again, there's a delay from the National Treasury in the release of the funding. One, as the chair of the Education Committee, have you followed up as to why and what are the reasons as to why the funds have been delayed for release to the schools? And then two, have specifications and justifiable reasons been given by the National Treasury as to why they have not released the funding in time?
Over the years, and I think this has been as a result of exchequer issues, the issues of raising taxes and all this, which is cutting across all other sectors. But a few months ago, we actually made this very clear to the CS that as you are releasing every critical coin, especially on salaries, make sure you release the capitation to schools on time, because every school activity relies on every cent that the National Treasury sends. Okay. If it delays, the activity is hampered. If it delays, the general programs of the schools are hampered. So if this money is released on time, and I think he made a commitment as a National Treasury that going forward, and that is why that was it said is 50-30, as opposed 50-30-20 is you release 50% of the amount in first term, second term 30%, 20% third term. That will, because bulk of the activities are in first term, and it will progress that way. Two, the issue of what has actually affected schools most of the time is because we had a shortage, huge shortage of teachers. But you realize that this year, the government recruited at 5,000. Okay. This one is now going to make sure that the thousands of BOM teachers who have been actually paid by schools will now come down. Okay. Thank you.
Honorable Nabi, coming to you, because I'm talking about the concerns that were raised by the principals who met in Mombasa County. And for example, schools have to cater for the prices of school necessities like food, stationery, cooking oil, electricity bills, laboratory, chemicals, apparatus, the replenishing of libraries and purchasing of other teaching learning materials. Board management teachers and non-teaching staff also have to be paid at the end of the month. Yet there is a cash crisis at the schools. There seems to be what the government is saying and what is on practice on the ground. I mean, how do we bridge this disconnect between the two realities?
First, thank you so much. And I want to thank my chairman. He's tried to be as candid as possible. But I also want to say a few things here. One of the basic problems that schools had in terms of a release of money is for many years until this financial year, last year, schools used to run a different financial year from the government financial year. Now, in terms of crossover, the government financial year used to end 30th of June. The school's financial year used to end in December. 31st. That would be a huge, unless you have somebody seated somewhere to try to synchronize, it created a huge problem in terms of release carryover of money. And that we must accept. And I want to thank that the reorganization so that the school financial year is the same as the government financial year should be able to sort out the problem of release, because then you don't need to synchronize anything. It is back to back. Come to your question, where is the problem? We must be as truthful as possible. First, we are living in difficult economic times. That is the truth. And what even the parent is supposed to do, especially like for boarding school. The boarding school, the parent is supposed to shoulder a big chunk of the cost. Because what the government gives, the 22,000, is mainly for a day school. Tuition. It's for tuition, basically. Now, if you choose, like I choose to take my children to a boarding school, then I must meet certain costs. Okay. The problem is parents are not paying. Why? Because they can't afford. So what is the way forward? We must start to rethink our approach to education. Are boarding schools sustainable in the future? If you are talking about 100% transition. And this is where the rubber meets the road. My brother, if we don't relook at it broadly, then quality education will be a reserve for the rich. And that's where my problem is. We must relook at our model. And I think in our committee where Julius chairs, we are having a very candid discussion. What kind of school do we want to have going into the future?
Are you proposing the abolishment of boarding schools?
We need to look at it.
Okay.
We need, sincerely speaking,
it's a discussion.
But sincerely speaking, in my own village,
okay,
I'll tell you as now a member of parliament, part of the pressure the members of parliament are having on bursary,
okay,
is boarding, for God's sake. And you give them, you have to give more money to the boarding child than this other child. And then this other child is telling, the parent is telling you, but mine, why are you giving mine 4,000 and you are giving this other one 12,000?
And when you say that, I'll come to then the two other options, which is the free primary education and free day secondary education. And here again, there's still a problem, and this is as expressed by the Secretary General of the Kenya National Union of Teachers, Collins Oyu, and the organization that he heads, in which he says that even in this circumstance, the situation in primary schools across the country and day secondary schools is dire because of the funds they have been allocated by the government, which is either insufficient to sustain their operations or these institutions will never be allocated funds at all. Still, there's a concern also on the other end. So even as you propose, or you have a proposal to look into boarding schools, what then is your perspective of looking at the other two options which are remaining that the government is looking into?
Let me tell you, truth be told, the capitation at 22,000 is not sufficient.
Yeah.
That is the reality. Yeah. And we must live to it. Like now, the cost of goods, I mean, everything is going to go up. Yeah. Economic. I mean, we cannot be living at 22. We are putting unnecessary pressure on the teacher. How does he survive with this amount of money? Then the second aspect to this, 100% transition, is even more complicated. Why? Because there is the question of infrastructure. And that is where Mele and I come in. Because now everybody comes saying, I have, for example, 74 secondary schools.
In your constituency? In
my constituency. Every year, the amount of money I will get is about 152 million for CDF. That money, the money for education is about 90 million. And
most of it also, 25% goes into bursaries.
Bursary, actually, for
you remain with around 65 million.
65 million. Yeah. I have, for example, 111 primary schools. The primary schools want money for infrastructure. The secondary school wants money for infrastructure. TVET students are also there. Yeah. I mean, it is that, even as much as people are saying 600, we have given so much money, 600, and I know some sectors, he will tell you in the debate, for us to defend even the 627, some other sectors are saying you are giving so much money to it. We are saying we need $1 trillion for education.
Okay, we'll hold that thought. Yes, Amos, please, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you so much. And I must begin by commending the current Committee of Parliament. We must have lost a few years ago after Meli left as the chair. I have to be very, very candid. The two of them are politicians from opposing sides, but I just love the way that Committee of Parliament is currently working, to be very, very sincere. They are quite candid, they are spot on, they really understand what is their mandate. Mheshimiwa Meli, that is how to run a Committee of Parliament, carry on. And Mheshimiwa Nabi, the kind of chemistry you people build in the committee is quite commendable. That's why we can see some of these successes. The challenge with funding, we need to understand 4 dynamics. 1, what are the sources of our financing? 2, the disbursement models. 3, absorption, and lastly, accountability. And there is a silent conversation that happens without people talking to each other. And this is the conversation between schools as well as the ministry. Maybe let me just step back a little bit back and start from where Mheshimiwa Nabi left, that education is going to be a preserve for the rich. And I have preached this gospel for many years, and I'm so happy that finally Parliament can also join in that choir, so that they are also now the converted, that education is no longer now a public good, is now becoming, it moved to a merit good, now it's now becoming a premium good. So in the long run, you'll end up having the poor not accessing education. So what does it really mean for us to provide education for everyone in this country? And that's what Mheshimiwa Nabii is putting across. What does it mean? And there are so many dynamics around that. I'll try to demystify two things. One, this country does not have a shortage of schools. This country has more than enough schools. If you walk in Nairobi, you are able to see where we have serious problems. And I want to say what Kenyans are very uncomfortable to say. You cannot have 3 schools sitting on land worth 2.5 billion in a city. And those schools are not even full. That is a fact, and we want to run away from it. And yet you are talking about a member of parliament here who cannot even raise 60 million to give education to others. So what we need is to define what is a school. And I've said this severally. We need to have what are the bare minimums of a school in terms of infrastructure, in terms of where it needs to be, so that we have got proper mapping. These members of parliament have really suffered, and I've spoken about this one severally. If you go to any big school around, you'll find an adjacent day school. Mheshimiwa Nabii here has Archbishop Njenga Girls, and next to it is St. Charles Luanga. Because now Archbishop Njenga Girls cannot address the needs of the locals. This craze about boarding schools creates 2 fundamental challenges. One, when you convert a school into boarding, it means that you lock out the locals. Because now you apply now the quota system. And it is us, the members of Chekalini, who gave our land to construct that school, Mheshimiwa, if you don't know that. We gave our land. We spend a lot of money on Harambes to construct that school. Then you come and tell us that the maximum we can get as opportunities in that place is 20 children. And people in Mautuma have refused to construct and do their work so they can also have a good school. Now we end up suffering. So as a result of that, we are forced again to set up a day school. Now when we set up a day school, this day school requires infrastructure, this day school requires teachers. So we have a problem with determining where should we put up a school. So if we have got a better way of redistributing what we call educational resources, the better way. Number 2 is this issue we talk about teacher shortage. Teacher shortage is a mirage in this country. Let's say the truth as it is. We have got more than enough teachers. The challenge is, one, we have not employed enough teachers, but that is still not the issue. The problem is with our formula of distribution of teachers. And I want to give this example.
But still you have to employ them, is it? Let
me just finish up. Don't cut me short. If you go to Pangani areas, you'll find Pangani girls giving art and craft. You'll find Starehe giving art and craft. You'll find Isili giving art and craft. This person is handling 20 children. Another one is handling 20 children. Another one is handling 30 children. So at the end of the day, you've got 3 resources handling 45 children. How do you compare it with another place where somebody is teaching 150 children for history, 150 children for English? So we must be candid and say that we need to relook at what we determine as a teacher, especially this formula for distributing teachers in secondary schools. The whole aspect, and I like it because it appears in the Presidential Working Education Party, the issue of resource sharing must be taken very, very seriously. I do not understand why St. Charles Luanga should be having a playing ground, asking you to buy money for them to construct a playing ground. And Archbishop Njenga Girls has a huge, facility there. Let's just be very honest. We are very, very wasteful. We are not efficient in the resources in this country. If we were more efficient, we have got more than adequate resources for us to provide education. Not money, adequate resources.
Thank you.
Let's rethink.
Hold on, Ken and Chairperson, because we'll be talking about also the breakdown of the numbers, what needs to go where in terms of the capitation, the teacher employment, recruitment, and I'll give you the right of reply to what Amos has just said after the break here on the broadcast. And you're watching Daybreak. The hashtag on Twitter is Daybreak. The SMS code is 22422 at Citizen TV Kenya and at Ayub Abdikadir, and as well at Safin_Cheng. We welcome your contributions, and towards the tail end of this broadcast, we'll sample them here on the broadcast. Stay tuned. Wait.